So I made a YouTube video about a year ago now talking about the college football playoff and my biggest problem with it. And the simple thing in that video was how much I dislike the idea of bye weeks in the college football playoff. And the number one reason is because we already know how much disagreement there is in the world of college football in regards to who should be placed where in a bracket. And then the other thing I've always disliked about bye weeks is simply that it really creates a weird element of having a team that is, yes, fresh, but also like it's college football. Teams haven't played in a month. A team basically being off for a month versus a team that played like 10 days ago creates a really strange element. And God, this first round of the playoffs, I realize it's not a huge sample size because it's 4 games, but first round for the teams appearing the first time off their bye weeks really helped that argument today. The last game was today of the second round of the playoffs, so the first game for 4 teams this round, and it is all of the teams that had the bye week lost. It looked like Arizona State and Texas, that's the first game I'm thinking of because that one ended up being the closest in the end. Arizona State got off to a slow start. Texas basically beat them in the end because there was a lot of things you can point to at the end of the game where it felt like the teams were equally competitive. But Texas jumped out to such a large advantage that it allowed them to be able to have enough of a lead that even though Arizona State came back in the end, that held them together. Kind of like the Alabama game earlier in the year against Georgia, where it felt like Georgia won the second half, but it didn't matter because Alabama had produced such a lead that they only needed one play in the end to win. And really kind of all the teams that didn't have that advantage or had that advantage of playing 10 days earlier and not having the bye, even though it shouldn't be an advantage, had an advantage. You saw even just going into halftime, Notre Dame take a commanding 13-3 lead. And basically at that point, it was like, and not to mention they get the second half kickoff going for a touchdown. It's like all these teams just trying to find their footing after having almost a month off from playing. Really, it's just a talking point that I don't want to exist. I'm almost creating the talking point, but I don't want the talking point to exist. And I just think knowing that what all these officials have said is that we're moving to a 14-team playoff, I have no idea why we aren't moving to a 16-team playoff. And the other thing I mentioned in that video I made almost a year ago now, where I talked about this idea of hating bye weeks so much, is it's not even that I want a 16-team playoff or I want an expanded playoff. I would rather have an 8-team playoff than a 16-team playoff, or rather an 8-team playoff than a 12-team playoff, just because of the fact that I hate the bye week so much. The bye week structure just creates such a weird thing. And now I have to sit here and ask myself if all of these teams that were seeded at the very least above the lower seeded teams that ended up beating them, I mean, it makes me have to ask the question, and I don't want to. I mean, Ohio State looked as dominant as any team versus anyone this season in terms of that first half they had against Oregon. Not like, and I mean like teams where dominant FBS teams played FCS opponents. They looked that dominant in that game in the first half. And it's like, if that's the case, I have to ask the question. And I don't want to have to ask that question. And it's more inventory. It's always weird when there's these elements that exist that make me say things that are associated with business too. It's like, because you can understand a lot of decisions people in charge of the college football playoff would make if it was worse for their business. But it's not worse for their business because it's more game inventory. I don't know. I also talked about in that previous video how scheduling may be kind of confusing, but I just can't imagine that's it either. It's just such a strange thing to me. I mean, like I said, we started off with Penn State, Boise State. Penn State jumps out to a commanding lead. We have Texas jump out to a commanding lead. We have Ohio State jump out to a commanding lead. And we have Notre Dame going into halftime with that commanding lead too. And that's why I just have to bring the question up. Because I don't I don't care for bye weeks. I didn't a year ago, and frankly, I'm surprised that these games all went in the favor of the team that didn't have a bye week. I am surprised by it, but I don't like it being a talking element at all. I really don't like it as a talking element. So I don't know who I'm really talking to here because I don't feel like anybody who would have control of the college football playoff would actually be watching this. But I really just want to ask that question, and I feel like the only person that I've seen in the media raise the same point on anything that's a major media outlet is Ryan McGee. And I just feel like I hope he keeps raising that point because it's a really, really interesting element to me. And like I said, I've heard the CFP talking about potentially expanding to 14 teams. I'd say just expand it to 16 because I really don't like this bye week element being so surprising to me because I don't want to take anything away from the winners' wins, but all of those jump starts that these teams had before the teams on the bye week kind of could even settle into the game made it really weird. I mean, props to Arizona State for being the team that I guess was able to come back from it the best compared to the other games. But man, college football playoff is a blast either way. I had so much fun watching all these games. It was great, and I'll be excited for the semifinals still. Just that's what I want to say. I don't like bye weeks. I really don't understand it in any sport, let alone this one. But awesome semifinal matchups. Can't wait for them. And yeah, hope you all enjoyed it too. See ya.